newspaper online.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 25 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. This next story is a disturbing story. Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
The story is a true story. Leif Wright is on the phone. I may be mispronouncing his name. He'll correct me in just a second. He's an award-winning journalist, the recipient of the Best of Gannett Award for the investigative series Shout at the Devil. He's the recipient of numerous Associated Press awards, a former crime reporter and managing editor, and the founder and publisher of an online newspaper, as well as being a ghostwriter and an author. His book is called Deadly Vows, the true story of a zealous preacher and with a polygamous union, the preacher, in other words, and a savage murder. There was one missing wife, I believe in the story.
Yes.
And I believe that the preacher we're talking about was a friend of our guest, of the author. Leif Wright, good morning. And first is how am I doing with your name? Is it Leif or Leif?
It's Leif. You're dead on, and most people get it wrong.
Okay, well, it's because of Leif Garrett. You have to blame him. You have to, maybe
he pronounces his Leif as well.
Oh, okay. So so then it's the disc jockeys that were making a mistake all this time.
Well, it doesn't shock me. It's an easy mistake to make.
Leif, thank you for being on the air with us. Where are you right now?
I'm in Oklahoma. I find it interesting that your town is called the horse capital of the world, and I live on a ranch in Oklahoma with horses. So.
Okay.
Coincidental.
Yeah, I think there's actually more than one horse capital, I think.
I think Kentucky's a big one.
I think so, too, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But anyway, thank you. So the person we're talking about is Sean Goff, is that right?
That's correct.
And he was a friend?
Yeah, he and I met in college in the 80s. And we were best friends until he started killing people.
Gosh, that had to have hit you very hard.
Okay, oh my goodness. Until he started killing people, what? Oh gosh, we can't. That's like jumping way ahead.
Well, you got that out of the way.
I just covered a lot of history in one thing.
Well, let me ask you something. As a journalist, writing a book like this. Did you have to think like a novelist? Maybe that's what I want to ask.
I tried to. I have written several novels, so I did try to make it a little more narrative than the average true crime book, which I find most true crime books boring. And so I wanted to tell more than the story of the crime. I wanted to tell the story of the guy who committed it.
Okay, which is exactly what you've done. In other words, it's not the People magazine version of a murder.
Right.
Or something of that sort. Okay, so you went to school with this guy, Sean, right?
Oh, yeah, we attended the University of Oklahoma in the late 1980s.
Okay, and at that time, was he what was he? What was he like?
He was your average guy. He was, everybody in the 80s was skinny, but he was skinnier than most. And he was just really friendly. That's kind of the theme of the book, is you just never really know what's inside somebody. Because he was literally the kind of guy who would give you the shirt off his back. And I use the word literally in its true form. I saw him give the shirt off his back to someone.
Oh, really? So he believed himself. He was a preacher, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And did you and he share religious beliefs?
Not initially. Initially, I was ambivalent toward religion completely, and he won me over to his side briefly. And so we did share religious beliefs for the bulk of our friendship. However, in the beginning and the end, we did not.
Just real quick, I want to ask you something. Your observation. Obviously, as a journalist, you've seen a lot of people in power, and power is an interesting thing, or the desire for power is just as interesting. Do you think he was heading in that direction?
I believe absolutely he was headed in that direction. He was brilliant. his IQ is in the 140 range, somewhere around there, and everywhere he went, he added value to people's lives, and televangelists saw that and took advantage of that. What they didn't realize is he was picking up tips from them as well, and he was on a road to fashioning his own large ministry like that.
Was he married to all three women at the same time?
He was. He had them all living in his house in San Diego.
And how did you feel about that, or did you not realize that?
Well, I didn't. Nobody knew initially, and when I found out, I was fairly upset about it. And he and I didn't talk for a couple of years because of it. When we finally did start talking, I realized that if I was going to be his friend, I was going to have to overlook some things that I didn't agree with, polygamy being chief among them.
Oh, man. Did you speak to the wives?
I did. I spoke at the time. I was flying back and forth to San Diego every month to do some work with a televangelist out there. And I would stay at his house when I was flying back and forth. And his first wife, who was a good friend of mine, told me she hated every second of it, but that he had threatened to take her son if she left him.
Oh my
but
goodness!
She was putting up with it. She was putting up with it for that reason.
So we're okay. So that sort of answers my next question, but I'll ask it anyway because maybe it applies to the other two women. Were they like the followers of Charles Manson? There's a weird sometimes. And I don't know if men do this, but women seem to do this. No, I take that back. I've seen men do it, I suppose, with the whole Jim Jones thing. There was men who drank the Kool-Aid too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a young girl right now in the news that she's in love with Charles Manson.
Yeah, they're supposed to get married.
But I mean, do you know how the people follow like a sheep, like this is Jesus Christ himself? Did they have that? Did he have that effect on at least the other two?
I think he had that effect on everybody around him, not to the degree of Charles Manson, but everyone who heard him said he was the greatest preacher they had ever heard. He and in fact, my website has clips of his preaching. He was just an amazingly good preacher, and in that type of religion, the fundamentalist Pentecostal religion, when you're in the middle of that, that kind of great preaching can cover up a whole lot of wrongs. And when people say, well, maybe I don't agree with this, but God is using this man, therefore maybe he knows something that I don't know.
Isn't that the mistake we all make?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
It's an easy mistake to make. It's how people overlook the excesses of televangelists. I mean, you only have to look at their hair to realize something's wrong.
That's right.
But people overlook that because they feel they're getting a message from these people.
All right.
Therefore, God must have something invested in them that they're not aware of.
Okay, so far, like I mentioned earlier, when you mentioned that he was a murderer, that jumped way ahead. But so far, if we except for that one revelation that you already told us, he's married. He's married to 3 women. He's what do you call a preacher who's well liked?
Oh gosh, I can't think of a word.
You know, there's
rare. I think the word
rare.
Revered. He's revered.
You know, they say about the guy, he's got a lot of
charisma.
He's a charismatic.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we've established that he's got 3 wives. One doesn't really want to be there. He's threatening her. That sounds pretty scary right there. Did he have the crazy hair?
No, he didn't have the crazy hair. Well, I don't know. Then again, it was the '90s, and so he looked like a character from Friends.
The perfectly the perfectly coiffed hair.
Yeah. He was a very, very meticulous individual. He always dressed perfectly. I was his diametric opposite. I've always been slovenly and messy hair, and he was perfectly dressed.
Yeah, we would get along. I'm that way too.
Were you and Sean embarking on writing a novel together? Is that why you both did research to plan the perfect murder?
Well, we didn't do research. We had a conversation about it. It was a really long conversation about. This was before Dexter came out, and we were going to write a book about a killer who watched TV crime shows and picked up clues from those shows on how to get away with murder, how to not leave behind evidence. And we had a long discussion about it, including how to get rid of a body and how to make sure that if somebody found the body, they couldn't identify who it was.
Okay, now if I was engaged in this conversation, and I had the other person was a religious man as he was, I would say, well, don't you think that there's at least one being who you can't hide from? God? I mean, why? How is it possible to even conceive the word perfect murder? In other words, the murder that you're going to get away with, when there's
it's a valid question, but the fact is, we were both pragmatic about religion. In other words, we were as helpers to televangelists, we were called upon to look behind the curtain and to see the ugly underpinnings of it all. And so we understood that in the Bible, God ordered murders all the time. So it's not necessarily that you have to get away with it in that mindset, so much as you better make sure it's sanctioned first.
God ordered murders.
Oh.
Yeah.
So when this was revealed to you about his wife, Joy, did you feel guilty? Do you think you helped aid and abet him?
I initially was horrified. Because let me backtrack. Because when she first turned up, when it first was clear that she was dead and that he had killed her, none of the other information was out yet. So the idea that he was covering it up and trying to make sure that nobody discovered her body, none of that was out yet. Nobody knew that yet. But when I found those things out, I was horrified because I thought, was he just using me as a sounding board to flesh out the idea of how to get away with this? And boy, I was just stupid to sit along and help him. Of course, hindsight is always 20/20. You can always look back and say, "Man, I should have known that." But you have conversations we're having one right now. You have conversations every day that you think, well, this is an academic conversation. This guy is not really planning to go murder someone.
Right.
Wow.
Exactly.
So at first she was missing, and he said she went on a trip with an old boyfriend or something?
Yeah, he said she had left him, and left her children with him, and was going to go backpacking across Europe with an old boyfriend.
Oh, my
Then it was discovered that she didn't have a passport, so he changed his story to say to go backpacking somewhere.
Oh, gee.
So who picked up on the fact that he probably killed her first? You or the police?
I never did. It was the police who were doggedly pursuing him, and in fact, when he turned himself in, they were about to call in homicide detectives. It took me completely by surprise.
Did you know her?
Yes, I knew her. I didn't know her as well as I knew his first wife, but I knew her fairly well.
Okay, so was she under the Charles Manson kind of a spell?
Initially, she was. And the reason she's now dead is she had extricated herself from that, and she was trying to get out of the relationship.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So what were any of her friends around her seeing her trying to do this, and then they just turned a blind eye to it?
No, they didn't turn a blind eye. She was not actively involved in it. She was making plans.
Oh.
And she had informed them that she was making plans, but that she was biding her time so as to not, upset the apple cart, that kind of thing.
Oh, gosh.
So eventually they found her body. They found her remains, right?
Well, yes, he turned himself in, and then the police asked him where the body was, and he invoked the Fifth Amendment, so he didn't tell them where the body was. And eventually, near Phoenix in Arizona, someone found a body buried underneath a bunch of stones, and they couldn't identify her, and it took another good 6 months before they did identify her.
And what year was this?
This was 2003.
Okay.
And how old were...
4 by the time.
How old were her children when she went missing?
One was a toddler, and one was probably 4.
Oh, gosh.
And now Sean had another child with his first wife, and that child is just about to graduate high school right now.
Oh, my gosh.
The book that we're talking about, that all this is in, is called Deadly Vows: The True Story of a Zealous Preacher, a Polygamous Union, and a Savage Murder. Leif M. Wright is the author of the book. He was not Leif wasn't, but Leif's friend, or former friend.
Yeah.
Sean Goff was married to 3 women. Would he have stopped at 3 if he hadn't murdered one? Would he have had a harem? Well, he had a harem already.
Yeah.
He definitely would not have stopped at 3. Now, the third wife had already been asked to leave by the time he killed the second one, and she was from New York and had already returned home by that time. But the family asked her to leave, and that was the difference. That's why she didn't get killed. Is they asked her to leave. She didn't want to just get up and go.
Oh, really? And the mistake of the one who died is that she mentioned it. She said, "I'm going to be leaving soon," right?
Well, she was working toward getting independence, which was a warning sign to him. And she had been making intimations that she was going to leave, but she didn't actually, take steps.
What? One of the photographs in the book shows that the teeth in the skull had been, it looks like, sawed out or sawed off. What happened there?
Well, how graphic can I get?
I don't know.
After he stabbed her to death at least a dozen times, and managed to not get any blood in the room that he did that with, or in. And then when she was dead, realizing that someone would be able to identify her, he cut her fingertips off so they couldn't use fingerprints. And then realizing that a lot of people use dental records to identify people, he sawed the teeth out of her head.
Goodness.
And then when he got her, he actually tried to decapitate her first and didn't have the strength to do it. And then when he got her out into the Arizona desert, he also bashed her face in and buried her under a bunch of rocks and tried to make it look like an Indian burial ground.
Oh, my God.
This is a man of God,
Yeah.
Yeah.
supposedly.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the whole thing is whenever someone is portraying themselves to you, they never portray the dirty, deep, secret part of themselves, and that's what, again, what the book is about, is all the signs you should be seeing, you don't see, because you're looking at the person that people are portraying themselves to be.
What was the reaction of his congregation? I mean, once they found out, did some believe it, or did some refuse to believe it and think somebody else did it?
Well, he wasn't a pastor at the time. He was an evangelist. But all of the people who knew him fairly well had to accept that he did it because he confessed that he did it. The only question at trial was not whether he killed her and mutilated her body. The question at trial was whether or not he did it in self-defense.
Oh.
Did it in self-defense.
Self-defense.
So bashes in the face, cuts off the fingers.
Oh, gee.
Well, he stabbed her more than a dozen times. It's so hard that it severed the sternum in her body. And what his claim was that she had attacked him, although he had no defensive wounds, and the only blood at the crime scene, there were a few drops of blood. The only blood at the crime scene belonged to her, not him.
How long was the trial?
6 weeks, I believe.
Gosh.
They called me to testify twice.
Oh my gosh. So how did that make you feel while you were testifying and you were looking him in the eye?
It was really creepy. The first time they called me to testify, I walked in the courtroom, and he and I had not spoken. It had been 3 years since we had spoken. And as I walked up to the stand and looked over at him, he smiled at me and winked.
Oh man!
And that's when I realized, hey, this guy has got problems.
Do you know, in doing what we do, one of the criticisms that we get now and then is, I mean, it could be a news story. It really doesn't even reflect us. But if we have a news story, let's say, about a priest who was abusing a child, somebody inevitably will write and say, why do you always have to tell us he was a priest? Why didn't you just say a man? Because when you say it's a priest, you're painting a picture that all priests are bad.
I've got a good answer for you.
Okay, and I want to hear it, but the same thing will happen if the word Marine is in there, if the word American is in there. Mm-hmm. It's like everybody doesn't want to say that people have an occupation if they're bad. They're just a man.
Yeah.
So I know.
Well,
so do you get that too? I mean, and I don't know if you'll get it from the book, but
I do get that. But the reason it's important to note who they were is they are in positions of authority over other people. In other words, a preacher, people, and a priest, people subjugate their free will in order to do what the preachers and priests tell them to do.
Right.
That the preacher and priest in authority over them and gives them immense power. The whole reason people were upset about the Monica Lewinsky thing was not that President Clinton was out getting things done. It was that he was in authority over her and therefore was abusing his power. The whole reason there are statutory rape laws is that young girls are not able to form consent because an adult has such a perceived authority over them. So the reason that it's important that he was a preacher is that so many people entrusted their spiritual lives to him.
yeah, absolutely. And a skillful wordsmith who also is using God to pretend somehow that it's God's will. Will twist words, even from the gospel, or even from scripture, or whatever, however you want to say that, to make it seem like this is what God wants.
Yeah.
Well, the crazy thing is he didn't even have to twist it. Polygamy is wildly endorsed in the Bible. So the polygamy part, he didn't even have to twist it to get people to believe him there. Now, murder, you've got to twist a few scriptures for that. But,
Right.
but polygamy, no, you don't.
So how do you justify thou shalt not commit adultery, and at the same time say, yeah, but you can be a polygamist? How does that get justified?
Well, using his convoluted reasoning, this is not my opinion. I want to disclaim that.
I think I know where you're going. Yeah.
The Bible only forbids women from committing adultery, not men. And also, if the woman is married to him, it's not adultery. So he was saying, okay, one, a man cannot commit adultery. Two, even if he could, I'm married to all these women. Now, you and I understand how crazy that is, but he was able to justify it using the Bible, and because he was so brilliant, it was impossible to disabuse him of that view.
But even if we were to talk as atheists, even if we didn't believe even if we didn't put any stock in the Bible, wouldn't we, as two reasonable people, say, what do you think the other women are thinking when you want to say to one, I love you with all my heart, and the other two, I also love them with my heart, all my heart. You just as two reasonable people, without even working God into this conversation, we could say, doesn't it make sense to you that none of these women really feel like you really love them because you've spread it out?
Well,
Yeah.
I'll play Sean's advocate for you. I say that instead of devil's advocate. Let me play Sean's advocate for you. Do you have more than one child?
Well, no, I don't. But I know what you're saying. Yeah.
How do you convince each of those children that you love them equally? The truth is, most parents have a favorite. And the truth is, if you have multiple spouses, you're not going to love them all the same. But from a perspective of someone who is good at manipulating people like Sean was, it was easy to exploit the whole children angle and say, if people can love children the same, why can't I love my wives the same?
Yeah.
Well, he really didn't have a heart to, have, children and three wives and then to even contemplate murder.
Well, actually, that's such a good point. Sean never had emotional attachment to any of the women he was married to. Sean never had emotional attachment to anybody. Again, that's one of those things that you look back and you see once you see what he's done. But the fact is, he made fun of people who allowed emotions to control them. And Sean made calculated decisions on who to marry and why to marry. He never fell in love and then got married. He got married because he found a suitable mate.
You must have really had a very emotional roller coaster while writing this book, because you had to make it true to form so it would help others to recognize the horrendous acts that he did in somebody else.
I did have a lot of problems while writing the book because I am no longer a fundamentalist, and going back and looking at the way I used to do was very painful. It was very difficult to listen to the people I used to know speaking the way I used to speak, and it was uncomfortable because, like I said, I'm no longer part of that religion, and it was difficult to see what kind of hypocrite I used to be.
Where is he now? Where's Sean now?
Sean is in prison in California.
For life?
He's 25 to life, so if he gets out, he'll be about 65, I believe.
Oh, my God.
Does he contact you? Does he know there's a book written about him?
He knows there's a book written about him. He told his family members to make sure I knew what a jerk I was to have written it, but he has not responded to. I wrote him several letters while I was writing the book, and he didn't respond to any of them. So I think it's safe to assume he's not my best friend.
Does that frighten you?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't frighten me. It's one thing putting Benadryl in your wife and killing her while she's been sedated, and it's another thing altogether to stand in front of a full-grown man and try that thing.
He's a coward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He's a coward.
very much so.
Leif, I have a question unrelated to all this stuff. One of the things it says is that you're a ghostwriter. Don't you hate that? You write a book and somebody else puts his name on it.
I do hate that, and most of the ghostwriting I did was for televangelists. Chances are, if you've read a televangelist book, you've probably read something I've written.
Oh, really?
And I quit doing that years ago when I started telling them I would no longer lie for them, and suddenly the work dried up.
Wow.
Oh, wow. So some of the guys we thought were good at writing, they weren't. You were.
Gosh.
They're not. They cannot possibly write all the things that are attributed to them. Those men are preaching, 200 days out of the year. When do they have time to write a book? They don't.
That's crazy.
Yeah, good observation.
So then have you write it and say, look, I told this guy to write my book, and here's what he wrote.
Yeah, put your name on it.
I wrote one guy's autobiography, and I had several interviews with him, and then at one point I knew some stories about him, but I didn't know any details, so I made them up, and then I submitted the book, thinking, okay, he's going to go and correct all these. And instead, he wrote a note saying, "You took some editorial license, but I really like it." So this guy's autobiography that he does contain stories that I made up.
Wow, what a lesson for all of us. Just be careful what you believe, and who you think is in control. Wow, what a great interview. This has just been a fun interview. I've enjoyed speaking to you.
I appreciate it. The publicist actually said I would really enjoy the interview with you guys, and she was right.
Oh, good. I'm glad we have some of a reputation there. I have a copy of the book. Let me give the copy I have. It's called Deadly Vows. Leif M. Wright is the author, if you want to look him up. How do we get so call me right now if you want the one I have. The rest of us have to go buy it. Leif, how do we buy the book?
Well, Amazon.com has it. I tried calling some bookstores in your area, but apparently it's too early in the morning. I've had some good success with Books A Million. Barnes and Noble can get it, but sometimes they don't stock it automatically. But every Books A Million I've tried has already got it.
That's interesting. Okay, and I'm sure is it an ebook as well?
Not yet. My publisher's kind of dragging their feet on that.
Okay.
But I tend to read things on my iPad all the time, so I kind of really want them to get it done.
Yeah.
But I don't think they've done it yet.
And finally, a website. Do you have a website?
Yeah, it's leifwright.com. That's LeifWright.com.
Okay, and I see Robin already has that on the guest list for today. So if you go to our website, you'll see the website right there. Plus, you can always call us and ask us.
There's a lot of really cool extras on that website that didn't make it into the book. There's a lot of photos of Sean and Joy. There's photos from the autopsy. There's clips of Sean preaching. Lots of cool things on there that didn't make it into the book.
Leif, great interview. Thank you so much for being on the air and enlightening us to how we are often fooled by people who we shouldn't allow to fool us. How about that?
Well, I appreciate it. It's been a good interview.
Yeah, sure has. Leif, thank you so much. We will take a little break and be right back.
You're listening to WOCA News Talk 1370, Ocala's source for what's happening in today's hottest, up-to-date news and topics.
Legally Yours, brought to you by